Hello everybody, Joe the Lawyer here, and thanks for watching. Hey guys, so recently I released a big video. It was pretty big, like 3.5 hours, and it was my deep dive into all aspects of the OSR, like every aspect of it, every little part of it. And it's gotten a great reception, but I realized that, 3.5 hours is pretty big for most people to sit there, even though it's broken up into chapters. So I had an idea, maybe I'll just put this out in pieces. That each main part has a separate piece, and that way people can sort of digest it at their own pace. I don't have to worry about listening to a big long video, essentially. And by listen, I mean because I just talk and show these cool black and white art pictures from old school D&D, so don't have to watch or anything. But I thought it might be a good idea because there's a lot of people recently who got into the OSR, or were looking to get into the OSR, and they came from a 5e experience, and maybe they watched some YouTubers like Matt Mercer, Matt Colville, GDD, and and that's their experience, and they're hearing about this OSR thing from the sidelines, and they're like, what is it? I want to check it out. And so basically, I figured let me do this big video, and now I'm breaking it up into pieces for you. So. You're going to hear a lot of references to things, boards or blogs or links to this or that, and maybe references to products. I have a link page for everything I talk about, so you guys don't have to take notes at all or anything like that. All right, so just click. The link page is included in the description here, as well as a link to the big video if you want to just listen to this thing all the way through. I'm dropping it in like 13 chunks, I think it'll be. So feel free to take a look at that. And one really important thing, guys, is I got a little contest going with Eric Tankar. Whoever gets to 5,000 subs first, the other guy, the other guys got to buy a steak dinner and donate $100 to their favorite charity. So I definitely want to win a steak dinner because I'm doing the Atkins diet, damn it, and I like steak. So anyway, guys, if you could like and subscribe and share it around, I really appreciate it. That would go a long way toward helping me beat them. I would really appreciate that. So without further ado, enjoy the video, guys. All right, guys. So, and here we go with the next section about settings. A good overview of all the major old school settings and some of the new ones too. They're sort of designed along the same way, keeping general principles, but yeah, definitely could adventure any old school game in the new school settings I'm going to be talking about. So we have to start first off with, of course, Greyhawk. This is where Gary set his adventures in. The city of Greyhawk was the big one. It was like the water deep of the Forgotten Realms. And that's the big one. Everybody played in it back then. We all had the map. That Darlene map was famous. It was the best, most well done map. The paper was printed on was awesome. It just felt different than anything you've ever felt before. It was cool. Darlene herself is still here with us, and I met her about 1.5 years ago at North Texas RPG. I got 3 pictures I'm looking at right now above my head on the wall in front of me that she autographed for me. I bought them. I put them in frames, and she's a cool lady. I remember we were both walking into, there was this late night, midnight, don't talk about what you see here, get together one of the nights, and I remember both walking in. I remember I did the old chivalrous, may I escort you in, my lady, kind of a thing. Put my arm out, she hooked in, laughed, giggled, and we walked in, sat there, and just watched the show. Fun time, awesome lady, great person. Yeah, can't say enough about her, about that, especially that map. It set the model for all maps, really, that people started doing, because it was the first world map that we ever saw, right? Now, Gygax wrote a stripped-down version of his setting. It didn't have all the stuff that any new settings have with like ridiculous amounts of detail. It gave you enough to start you off with, and you had to fill in the blanks. It first came out as like a folder, and you had the map and the book in there. And then later he expanded it to the Greyhawk box set. I actually didn't know until a few years ago that there was even until I got into the OSR, that there was even a folio version of it. And then I got a copy for myself, and it's basically the same thing, more detail in the box set though, right? So now you're going to hear about the old Gary Gygax in Greyhawk, and then we got the new Greyhawk, because Wizards TSR, I think it was TSR then, yeah, decided they're going to update Greyhawk and make it their own and get Gary the hell out of here, because they hated Gary at a certain point. So they got Carl Sargent. Now Carl Sargent has been doing a lot of things out there in the RPG industry. He was a shrink, I think, from England, some kind of paranormal researcher too, I think. I don't know. Maybe it lends itself to RPG design. Who the hell knows, right? But his approach to creating settings and how things operate, very realistic, very realpolitik, if you want to get into Kissinger style of things. It made sense to me. There was cause and effect, and things hung together. And so he basically, there was the big war in Greyhawk, and then he wrote the setting book that came after the war, which kind of reset the world, right? And it was called After the Ashes, or From the Ashes. I'm sorry, I keep calling it After the Ashes for so many years, but it's From the Ashes. The link is in there, and it was fantastically done. There was an atlas that was put out for it afterwards as well, and that's right, an encyclopedia as well, an atlas as well, encyclopedia basically. And he actually wrote a couple of supplements. One was the Marklands. Another was Iuz, the Evil, I-U-Z. I always call it Iuz. I guess it's I-Use. Who the hell knew? I-U-Z. But I call it Iuz, but I-Use, the Evil. Then he wrote one called an adventure called City of Skulls, where you got to sneak into I-Use's capital city and rescue somebody who's being held prisoner in there. And the person you rescue actually was a knight or whatever, and he was broken and battered. They tortured him to death, and his brain was scrambled, but they wanted you to rescue him anyway. They didn't know that, I don't think, but just as a figurehead to rally the troops. So they were going to marshal out this guy who you rescued in order to rally the troops, because the battle continued. There was it was like the Maginot Line or whatever, and you had to get, rally the troops and get their morale up. So that was the whole premise of the adventure. Fantastic adventure, fantastic supplements. So if you're going to get anything, if you can only get one thing, honestly, I hate to be this now. A lot of people are going to hate me. The old school guys are going to hate me, but I'm going to say get all the Carl Sargent stuff. You don't need the Gygax stuff. You'll get enough out of the Carl Sargent stuff to understand what the Gygax stuff was. So, all right, I'm waiting for the arrows and slings to come hitting me now. Somebody's going to hire assassins to take me out for that one. All right, now the next setting, of course, has got to be Forgotten Realms. Now you're saying, this is old school. That was mostly second edition, blah, blah, blah. Mostly. The first edition of Forgotten Realms was in a gray box and had a really cool picture of a dude on a horse, evil-looking, savage-looking guy. I loved it. I can't tell you enough how much I loved it. In fact, when I ran a Forgotten Realms campaign in 5e, I took the AD&D first edition Forgotten Realms box set and the first couple supplements before they transitioned to second edition. There was a second edition setting, and a third, and a fourth, and a fifth, whatever. But I took the first edition stuff that they came out with, the Savage Frontier and the City of Waterdeep and all that stuff, and I used that as a springboard and made everything else my own. Can't beat it, right? Now, a lot of people don't know, but the original basic set, was set in a world that was fully developed later with gazetteers. It was called Mystara, and they had a whole world. It was a world map, and I didn't know this actually, really, but it was crazy. It was crazy how little I knew about this until the OSR was really kicking, and I think Mr. Welch has a YouTube channel. You should check him out because he loves this setting. He's put out books on this setting. He dives into this setting. He's a Mystara guy. He loved it, and it's really a cool little setting. Now, I talked earlier about Tekkamul, the Empire, the Petal Throne. You can get that setting over at Noble Knight Games. There was a reprint recently, I believe. Well done. Judges Guild had their own setting called Wilderlands of High Fantasy. Now, Rob Conley knows that shit better than anybody. He helped do the maps for it. He helped develop some of the books for it. And he's run me in his reskin version of it. And he's going to be putting out his own setting based a lot on the same principles and some of the stuff in Wilderlands of High Fantasy. So keep an eye on that. Watch this space for what Rob puts out. Now, here's one I don't like, but I got to include it because it was there. Planescape, all right? Planescape was a setting for second edition, a box set that came out, and I know I'm going to ruffle a lot of feathers here because a lot of Planescape fanboys and fangirls out there, but I couldn't stand the goddamn thing. They basically wanted to do a setting that was something to bring together all the planes, all planar travel, and how it all worked and this and that. Rather than just using Manual of the Planes for first edition, this was their attempt to say, to hell with Manual of the Planes. We're going to use that as a springboard and make an entire setting based on it. There's a city called Sigil, S-I-G-I-L, which, interestingly enough, I think is what they're calling their new VTT now at Wizards of the Coast. But, the City of Doors, and it's how you got around from various settings, and it was you could mingle with demons and devils and angels and saints, whatever it was there. And there was a weird way of talking, like based on his old English accents. It's just so stupid. Anyway, enjoy Planescape if you want, but I hated it. Another one that TSR put out back in the day was Lankmar. Fritz Leiber licensed Lankmar to Gary. Gary was a huge fan. Fritz Leiber was a special guest at many early conventions for TSR, all the Gen Cons. And he was one of those honored guests, and Gary loved him, and they talked a lot and this and that. And Fritz Leiber licensed, you can make modules and adventures and develop out the setting based on all my books. Fritz didn't really have a lot developed. He made it up as he went along, whatever he needed to do. So people at TSR had to get together, read all the books, and figure out, oh, he mentions this here, it must be there. Then they used that as a springboard and made it their own. Now, there was a first edition Lankhmar book and a second edition. They were very, very similar. The only difference is that the second edition book, number one, was better, but it included more material because I think at the time they put out the first edition book for first edition D&D, Fritz Leiber hadn't finished writing all the Lankhmar stories. He later did. And so they put out a second edition of the Lankhmar setting book, which I linked to, and that has all the information from the later stories as well. Well worth it. They introduced, first time I ever saw at least, something called Dungeon Geomorphs. It may not be the first time it was invented, but used, but I think that's the first time I ever saw it. Because you didn't want to you didn't want to detail the city-state invincible overlord and have it a label and a description of every single building in an entire massive city. So they did geomorphs for it, which is kind of fun to see. I used those. They were pretty decent too. But check that book out. Now, Mongoose later had a Lankhmar line, and it sucked. But what you have now, though, is Goodman Games is putting out a Lankhmar line. They're doing a deep dive into this and looking at all his notes and everything he ever wrote down about it. Somebody hit the archives. He spent a lot of time at a university archives reading all his stuff, and did, I think, perhaps the best version of Lankhmar that I've ever seen, though it doesn't tick the nostalgia button like the other one did. A little side note about Lankhmar, I guess TSR, well, the royalties from TSR for Lankhmar kept Fritz Leiber going in his later years. He didn't have to grind. He had a drinking problem, famously. I don't know if he was drinking still, but he didn't have to grind out. He wasn't living in abject poverty anymore. He had more of a fun lifestyle. He could travel, do some things, and he got some respect, And people all of a sudden knew who he was again, because he's one of the the luminaries, rather, of the golden age of science fiction fantasy writing back then. In fact, Fritz Leiber, I think, is the one who coined the term sword and sorcery. He made it up. He was the first guy. So, so that's Leiber. Anyway, check out those. I still look at Lankhmar as a good model of a thief. If you want to do a thief's adventure or a city based around thieves, that's the one to do. And definitely read his books, too. I don't know who's getting the royalties anymore from those. I don't know. Maybe his son. I remember back in about 20 years ago, I found that his son was a university professor, and I sent him an email. I said, I just want to thank you for everything, your father did. Just respect for your father, man. He really influenced a lot of things in my life, and I appreciated it. And he wrote back real nice, and thank you, and this and that. But all right, now, Dragonlance. I talked about it a while ago in different contexts as the development of the adventures, and have influenced the development of second edition game and all that. But there's a whole Dragonlance category over on DriveThru. You could pick up all I think the modules have been combined into all first four modules in one book sort of thing. I don't own those. I just own the original modules. So take it with a grain of salt. I haven't read them. That's what's out there though. All right, and I know that I spoke of MERPs and Rollmaster, but Middle-earth is a great setting. And Rollmaster from the MERP setting, based on a Rollmaster system, was my take, the best interpretation of it. There's a lot of new, Middle-earth crap out now, 5th edition and others, but for my money, MERPs go with that. They had the best modules, the best setting books that you possibly get out there for it. Now, one other setting TSR put out was called Dark Sun. It was a psionic-based post-apocalyptic sort of a setting. Is it D&D? Is it old school? Like I said, I wasn't going to get into Boot Hill and sci-fi and shit. I don't know. But I think just for the psionics alone, it's worth it. In fact, as I make my own little psionic system for my game, I'm going to use some of that as inspiration and ideas, because they really... But the one thing the Dark Sun did is develop out the psionic system more than any other system did ever, for second edition. The second edition, by the way, guys, psionic system is the best psionic system out there. Every other one has been a pale imitation of that. Most other psionic systems are based around a spell system, and they're just calling it psionics, and you're giving it PowerPoints and spell slots. That's all it really is. They suck. A true psionic system has psionics operating very differently than spells and doing different things than spells do, and that's what the second edition psionics did. So you get the Dark Sun books, you get the original psionics handbook for AD&D second edition, and you're good to go there. All right. Another one I'm going to mention is Hyperborea. I know that's an RPG, and I told you they were developing through modules and otherwise. Jeff is working hard on a city now. I talked to him at ShireCon about a month or so ago. He's working hard on developing a capital city of this world, and he's really working on the world too. So it's good. If you get his modules, you will see the development of his world, and I can't wait till he does his Kickstarter for the capital city of the world. I'm looking forward to that. Now, some of the newer ones out there that are well worth looking into. Midderlands. I am not a fan of the style of it. It's from Monkey Blood Design. Glenn Seal. Fantastic maps. Way interesting take on a lot of things for settings. Well developed and well done. Not my style, but I know a lot of you would like it. So I'm not going to diss it because it's awesome and Glenn Seal's a cool fucking dude. So get Midderlands, check it out. Another one is Dolmenwood. All right, the guys who bring you old school essentials, now they're making a setting for it over at Necrotic Gnome. So Gavin, all right, Gavin, definitely get Dolmenwood. That's Gavin's setting. And last but certainly not least, it's a mini setting. It's called Black Marsh. It is Rob Connolly's setting. It's free. Here's the best thing. It's free. Get it on DriveThruRPG. I think it's the #1 gold best-selling setting on the entire goddamn site, if I remember right. So the link is there. Pick up Black Marsh. It's a city and the lands surrounding it, which will later be incorporated wholesale right into Rob's setting that he publishes someday. It's coming eventually. Someday it's going to come. So get Black Marsh and you'll have a great setting to start off your guys with. In fact, Eric Tenkar ran us through some stuff in Black Marsh back in the day. I didn't even know it was Rob's stuff. I had no idea until later. I'm like, oh, that was you? I knew of a Viz before. I didn't know what it was, but yeah, I had no idea it was Rob's thing. So it was really fun. It's a great setting. I had a great time in it. There's a lot of detail there. Rob and I think alike. In fact, if you get his book, you look on his site there, you can click on it on DriveThru. When you look at Black Marsh, click on his publishing site, and you'll see how to make a fantasy sandbox. I edited that book. A lot of the principles behind that go into the Black Marsh setting. So if you're going to get one, get the other. Black Marsh is free. Buy the other one. Give Rob some money, and it'll be a good time. All right. So that is my overview of all of the settings, guys. And it's fantastic. Now keep in mind the Piazza I mentioned before is a board that's still going strong. They're talking about all these settings and more. So hop into the Piazza, okay? And the link is in the links again above under when I talk about boards. All right. So next we're going to tackle zines or zines as Eric calls them wrongly, just because it's I don't know why he calls them zines, but they're zines, Z-I-N-E-S. All right. We're going to tackle that in a second.